समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Let me tell you first of all why I love my job so much. You can make many guesses, but I think I will surprise you. The reason I love my job so much, especially so, is because I am finding out new things all the time. And quite often, when you start looking for something, researching something, meet a new person, have a new conversation, you go with a certain expectation, or you might have a certain idea of what you're looking at, but you discover something else. So this is not losing your way. This is not like the old line, "Jate the Japan pahunch gaye Cheen." Not like that. It's like when you go on a walk in the hills, or when you start climbing a mountain, you suddenly discover a surprise, a meadow on the way or a waterfall on the way. I'm using sort of colorful expressions to explain to you something that is hard, political, diplomatic, and something that concerns India's strategic future going ahead. Also, India's most important strategic relationship. I started reading up on Sergio Gor. Sergio Gor is designated to be the new American ambassador to India, Donald Trump's choice. His nomination hearings have been going on the Hill. That's a process that the Americans have, where every key personnel appointed by a president goes through hearings, has to make an opening statement saying what he stands for, what he or she, or what they are going to deliver. That's the more contemporary usage, they in place of he or she, although I don't think Trumpians would particularly bother. Nevertheless, there's an opening statement, and then lawmakers question the person. Also, then whoever is going to be the lawmaker's boss, in this case Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, also makes a statement in terms of what is expected of the person, of the new ambassador in this case. And I was reading up more on Sergio Gor, fascinating character at just 38. 38, and it struck me that he must be the youngest US ambassador to India ever. And when we checked, we found that he is the youngest for sure. Youngest before him was Richard Verma, that also not long ago. Richard Verma, he was 46 when appointed ambassador to India. Now, 38, Sergio Gor. And then I thought that what about others? How old is Marco Rubio? And how old is Tulsi Gabbard? And the penny dropped. Could it be a very young administration? So Donald Trump, and that is the discovery we made. That is the surprise meadow that we discovered in our walk through the hills that we thought we were familiar with, which is who said what in this hearing, where does Sergio Gor come from, etc., etc. And that discovery is what makes this episode of Cut the Clutter even more fascinating. That Donald Trump is the oldest American to be sworn in and president, and not just in his second term. When he was first elected in 2017, he was already the oldest man to be sworn in as President of America. I have no hesitation saying oldest man, because no woman has become President of America as yet. If anything, Donald Trump has become president twice, defeating women rivals. So even when he took over the first time, he was 70 years old, oldest man to become President of America. And now he's 79. He's just turned 79. He'll be 80 next year. And lo and behold, normally you would have thought that, oh, old man, many people have grown with him. He's known many people. He's been buddies with many people. That's how trust builds up over time. So his cabinet, his people will be like that. But that's not true. That's not true. He has built the second youngest White House and US administration and the US cabinet in America's history. The youngest before him was Senior Bush, George H.W. Bush, the Senior Bush. So the contrast of the oldest president, oldest when elected, because somebody might get up and tell me Biden was older, but Biden got older during his term. The oldest president ever elects the second youngest cabinet ever. And look at his cabinet members and look at how young they are. J.D. Vance, his vice president, 41, just 41. Pete Hegseth, defense secretary, you see him with his tattoos and biceps and doing his push-ups with his troops, 44. Tulsi Gabbard, director of national intelligence, was sworn in at 43, now 44. Stephen Miller, don't we all know him in India? He doesn't particularly love India or Indians, or at least it looks and sounds like that. White House Deputy Chief of Staff, 40, age 40, was 39 when he was appointed. Caroline Leavitt, you see the press secretary, the most visible face of the Trump administration, and she's quite brilliant at her job. She is just 28, was 27 when appointed. Youngest in America's history, youngest White House spokesperson in America's history. Kash Patel, FBI Director, 45. Kristi Noem, Secretary of US Department of Homeland Security, 53. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, 59. Scott Bessent, normally you might think, okay, these Bessent, Lutnick, they'll be much older guys and old buddies of Trump from school, college, club, wherever. Maybe they appeared at his club as in Mar-a-Lago, but they are much younger people. Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, 63. Howard Lutnick, Secretary of Commerce, 64. And Michael Waltz, who was appointed National Security Advisor, but then lost his job because he made the mistake of getting that Atlantic editor on the same group on Signal while planning attacks in Yemen. He was just 51. So this is how young his people are, and that's why you shouldn't be surprised that his choice for India as the ambassador is only 38 years old. Now contrast that with India. In India, you would rarely take a 38-year-old seriously. A 38-year-old will struggle to become joint secretary in the government of India. At various levels, we've tied seniority and the number of years with responsibility. So there was a time when chief economic advisor could be somebody in their 30s. No longer possible now, because you have to find equivalence everywhere, and that tells you where the world is headed. So Trump, and this also explains Trump's particular affinity with people who are described generally as, it's not my favorite expression, but it's an expression that also the American media uses a lot now, that is tech bros. So all these tech CEOs who are all in their 30s and 40s, though they are the ones that Trump is most at ease with. And we had featured this element in an earlier Cut the Clutter on Palantir, where we talked about how Trump had packed his security system with these very young technology officers from these tech companies, in many cases by getting them to enroll as officers in the Army Reserve, so they could get clearances and also come and work in the Pentagon as and when, because Trump wants the US to catch up with China and to stay ahead of the world in technology. In fact, in our country, we link wisdom with age to such an extent that even our head of national cyber security has to be somebody in late 50s, because it will be a lieutenant general or equivalent, something like that. Whereas technology is moving all the time. So that, in a way, is a failure of the Indian system, where hierarchy is linked to knowledge and hierarchy is also linked to responsibility. I will take you back to a story when I was writing something about a national interest on Indian politicians tending to be so old. And I then had a conversation with Madhav Sindhia, which was reported at that time, where he said, listen, my party still keeps telling me that I am too young for a more responsible position. He was railway minister. He said, my party still thinks that I'm too young for a more responsible position. But look at me. I am 52. I am a grandfather already. So how much older do they want me to become to be taken seriously? That is a weakness with the Indian system. You might have said America elected a very old president. There were questions about he's old, Biden is old, then Biden dropped out at the last moment. But then again, Trump, health, cognitive decline, etc., etc. But see the team he's chosen. So you can be whatever age, but if you acknowledge the fact that the world has moved on, that today's skills, today's knowledge, the energy levels that today's politics and governance requires needs much younger people. You can build a very young team as Trump has done in this case. That has to be appreciated. Sergei Gor is actually, he wasn't born as Gor. He was born as Sergei Gorkhovsky, and as the name would indicate to you, of Russian origin. So he is a man of Russian origin. He was born in a Russian origin family in Tashkent, in what is now Uzbekistan. His family emigrated from Tashkent to Malta. Malta is a tiny European archipelago in the Mediterranean. From Malta, he emigrated to the US. That's why sometimes in American writing, he's called Trump's Maltese Falcon. There are many other descriptions for him in American media, and I will describe them for you. One is Trump's Svengali. So again, I had to read up on Svengali because I'm vaguely familiar with that name, but I don't read so much fiction, and definitely not this kind of fiction. So I had not read where Svengali comes from. Svengali is a character from George de Maurier's famous book, 1894 book, Trilby. Trilby is the story of a singer, and Svengali is like a hypnotist magician who takes control of her mind, dominates her in such a way that she becomes a superstar. So what does this description tells you, Trump Svengali? That there is somebody who takes charge of Trump's mind and makes him into a superstar, makes him into a top leader, makes him into a winner. So Gore has worked very closely with Trump for all these years and done a lot of stuff for him, which I will tell you. At the parties in Mar-a-Lago, he was always known to be sort of the leader and life of the party wherever he was. So at Mar-a-Lago, often he took over as the DJ. So he was also called Mayor of Mar-a-Lago because it looked like the boss man there and controlling everything and delivering everything for Trump. He's now described as mayor of hiring for Trump and also general manager of White House, all at this young age. In fact, his formal designation is the head of White House Office of Presidential Personnel, and his job has been to pack the administration with Trump loyalists, and he has filled 4,000 positions there like that. In fact, even if in his opening statement to the Hill at his nomination hearings, he said that he's filled up positions, 95% positions have been filled up in record time. So he's very effective. I also read up more about him and his mind, and I see a reference somewhere that at one point he had a dog, a beagle named Machiavelli. He's obviously somebody who also reads a little bit and is fascinated about those intriguing characters or those intriguer characters in the history of political science. Sergei Gor discovered politics very early in life, in his 20s. He discovered politics in his 20s. He became a congressional aide. He worked with different people on the Republican side. He was always a Republican and on the harder right side of the Republicans. So he worked with many Republicans, but particularly he worked with Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. He's now a kind of critic of Donald Trump, but he's a man of hard right. So for a long time, Gore worked with him in his late 20s, 30s, became his deputy chief of staff, started out being a spokesman, like communication director, then became his chief of staff in 2018. That established him in the Republican hard right network. By that time, Trump was already president and Gore had started cultivating Trump and his people. There was a time when he officiated in the sense that he was a signatory at a small wedding ceremony for Matt Gaetz. He was a congressman, and remember, he is the controversial nominee for Attorney General's office that Trump withdrew. Trump withdrew his nomination after many sex scandals about him emerged. Gore has signed as officiant, that is the position in formal weddings, in his wedding, but he has signed in such an exaggerated way that his signature went out of the box and state of California rejected that wedding, and Matt Gaetz says that he had to get his wedding registered again and get Gore to sign his name again within the box. So he's got that style about him. I mean, if you were a critic of him, you would say, oh, that is so upstartish. But given where he's reached already, he's not particularly an upstart. He's somebody who arrived quite some time back. And when Trump lost power, he stayed on with Trump. Trump lost power. He was among the very few people who stayed on with Trump from the old lot, and he was very young then. And Trump has now paid him back for that loyalty. In fact, he was so loyal to Trump that Peter Navarro, who's not the favorite of anybody in India at this point, he's somebody who gets up every day and says rude things about India, including try and wear into India's caste system, which probably doesn't know very much about. And I hope he doesn't start trying to learn about Indian caste system at this point, because it might take him another 100 years. Nevertheless, Peter Navarro was sent to jail, as we told you in that episode of Kartak Letter on Navarro himself. We'll share a link of that with you again. Peter Navarro acknowledges that Sergio Gor came to visit him in jail, and also that Gor looked after his fiancée while Navarro was incarcerated. The big boss has lost power. He may never come back to power, right? So you use and dump and you move on to other people, because if you are a climber, then you will see where to climb next. But in this case, Sergio Gor visited him in jail, and Navarro says he also looked after his fiancée. How? He doesn't say, but you can see that Sergio Gor has the ability of building and cultivating these relationships in the long term. Gore collected his brownie points when Trump was not in power. And that's an experience that anybody who deals with politicians has. That politicians have a lot more time for you when they are out of power. And more often than not, they also show you some gratitude for paying them attention when they did not have anything to give to you. So he stuck with Trump. When Trump wrote his memoir, and all of the big 5 publishers in America refused to buy that memoir because they said this will not pass their fact checks, he set up a publishing house with Don Jr., that is Donald Trump's son. And that publishing house was called Winning Team Publishing. There they published Trump's memoir and earned millions and millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars for Donald Trump from his book. Charlie Kirk, who just got assassinated, the 31-year-old who just got assassinated, he was very much a right-wing speaker and a right-wing opinion leader, and an opinion leader of the hardest of the hard right. In fact, a lot of what he said was downright racist. He's just been assassinated. Nobody should be assassinated, whatever their politics. It's a terrible thing. He and Sergei Gor also wrote a book jointly. Winning Team Publishing, by the way, still continues to publish. Their latest big publication is a 300-page picture book. On the cover is Donald Trump with blood, right? Raising his fist like that. Remember that failed assassination attempt? And copies signed by Donald Trump are selling at $499. And you can see that they must be selling like mad and producing a lot of money. Now, he became the CEO of Super Political Advisory Committee, of a kind of a super political advisory committee for Trump. That raised tens of millions of dollars for him. It also brought in Ike Perlmutter, who was the CEO of Marvel Entertainment, who contributed a lot of money to the Trump campaign. And from Feb 24, they started running campaigns on Trump all over the media. And the money was raised by Sergei Gor and his Super PAC. How close Sergei Gor is to Trump family and to Trump's son, Don Jr., and also what a close band of brothers they were on the American hard right, that he, along with Don Jr. and Charlie Kirk, this January went to Greenland, and went to Greenland in Trump's aircraft, Trump One, not Air Force One, Trump Force One, right? Trump Force One. They went flying that into Greenland, held a podcast there, recorded a podcast there in one cafe or bar kind of place, collected a bunch of Greenlanders who wore Make America Great Again caps. That's when Trump was talking most aggressively about taking over Greenland from Denmark, even not ruling out the use of force as well. And in that get together, they also had Trump get on the phone and put the phone on speaker, and Trump is then basically campaigning with Greenlanders. This is how close this group was. When you see Sergio Gor appointed to this job in Delhi, you can understand what an important figure he is in the Trump ecosystem. He's had his troubles. He had a big fight with Musk. Both said rude things about each other. Finally, Musk left. Musk also thought that Gore had sneaked on Musk's friend. Jared Isaacman, you might remember, was Trump's nominee to head NASA. And then at some point, stories came out that he had in the past contributed to Democratic Party. Because of that, Matt Gaetz pulled his nomination. Musk's people believe that Gore it was who whispered in Trump's ear stuff about Isaacman's past political affiliations. Now, I've also seen stuff written on Sergei Gor that say that he seems to be closer to the father even than his son. And Don Jr. himself has said that Sergei seems to have had dinner with dad more than me. Now, Sergei Gor loves diplomatic adventure. 2018, when he was just over 30, he accompanied Senator Rand Paul carrying Trump's letter for Vladimir Putin. Now that takes a great deal of audacity and also makes him a very unconventional diplomat now that he's going to have that role formally. Again, like many of the Trump people, Pete Hegseth, for example, he has a Fox News connection. So he was a booker at Fox News. Booker means what in India we'd call guest relations, people who invite guests. But in this case, Fox News being as ideological as it is and as close to MAGA as it is, people who wanted to rise in the MAGA system and the Republican systems, they wanted to appear on Fox News. That's where he commanded extraordinary power as well. Which brings us back to the policies he might follow. Now, the hearing on the Hill, everybody says nice things because, first of all, the first priority is to get clearance, because sometimes one single solitary lawmaker can hold up your appointment for a long time, as we saw in the case of Eric Garcetti in Biden administration. He had to cool his heels for a very long time before he was cleared to come to India. So with that caveat, let me give you a summary of what Gore has said. First of all, Marco Rubio, introducing him, said that India-US relationship is among the most important relationships of this century. That is something that Biden people had also said, and before that Trump people had said, and before that Obama people had said. So that is a kind of restoration of status quo ante of the rhetoric on India, because this cuts the clutter a little bit from all the stuff that Navarro and Lutnick and Besant have been saying. The second thing that Marco Rubio said was that 21st century will be defined by the Indo-Pacific, and that's where India's role is critical. That said, let's see what Sergei Gor said. He says, first of all, a very interesting line. He said, if you've noticed when he, as in Donald Trump, if you've noticed when Donald Trump goes after other nations, he goes after their leaders. See what he did to Zelensky, for example. I'm adding that. While President Trump has been critical of India, he goes out of his way to compliment Modi. That's what Sergei Gor says, to make the point that Trump and Modi have a very good personal relationship. Then he says, of course, that India must stop buying Russian oil. He doesn't say by when. He describes Indian diaspora as incredible, which must be fostered and grown. So he's not going with the usual hard right MAGA line, even Charlie Kirk line. That's been that too many Indians have come in and now they should be restrained or limits. Then Gore goes on to say that India has been on our side, that means on America's side, on most issues in BRICS. It's also much more willing to engage with us. That again contrasts with other people in Trump cabinet saying India must leave BRICS. Lately, Howard Lutnick said that. Then next point, I'm just summarizing it. Next point, he said India must become more open. I will try and make India more open for buying American crude oil, LNG and petroleum products. So far, so good. India is important for our business because Indian middle class is larger than all of America. We might have our moment of hiccup, he says, but we are on track to solving that. Our relationship has been built over decades. He says over decades, America has had a good relationship with Indian people and Indian administrations. And the basis for that also is that India, like America, is also concerned about Chinese expansionism. Then he says America has concerns. He will have concerns about India's protectionist policies and regulatory barriers, which are an impediment to American economic interests. That is something that I think every American ambassador would have said in his nomination hearings over the past 30-40 years. I will also read a couple of interesting lines from the text of his testimony because these also come to defense and some critical areas. He says, India is one of the most important relationships our nation has in the world. I will work to deliver on the President's agenda and advance US interests by strengthening our defense cooperation, ensuring fair and beneficial trade, deepening energy security, and furthering technology development in the 21st century. Then he goes on to say, I will prioritize deepening defense and security cooperation. This includes expanding joint military exercises, advancing co-development and co-production of defense systems. That's a little bit different from Navarro saying that India just wants to buy our weapon systems and produce them in India, so we lose our technology. This is a different line from that because he's talking about co-development and co-production and concluding critical defense sales. These efforts will enhance interoperability between our forces while supporting American defense manufacturers and making America more prosperous. Further on, there are references similarly to artificial intelligence, pharmaceuticals, critical minerals. The potential for collaboration is vast. He says Indian pharma accounts for 40% of the imports, 40% of the generic drug imports into America, and he would encourage Indian pharma to invest in API manufacture. APIs, as you know, are active pharmaceutical ingredients. Right now, China has a near monopoly in the world over that, and India has also been trying to counter that by bringing back API manufacturing in India. He says he would also like Indian pharma to invest in the US so that everybody gets more pharmaceutical security. So that's the policy part. So far, so good. However, the most interesting thing would be to watch the arrival of this very young ambassador, the very young ambassador from the most powerful country in the world in New Delhi under a Trump mega administration.